This is a presentation which is based on an article by Sitadevi, and it's called In Harmony, Reflections from the Life of Sitadevi. And what I was thinking when I chose this topic was that Sita's life is one of miracle, innocence, beauty, love, drama, and tragedy. She's one of the 5 most chaste women listed in scripture, and meditating on any of these 5 can destroy the greatest of sins. They're so powerful, these people. And through her wonderful tale, we can grasp and gather the jewels of self-realization. And for us as ladies, it's especially, we can especially resonate with her trials and tribulations and what she's been going through. So who better to learn from than Sitadevi? That was my feeling. So I was wondering if we could put people into breakout rooms, 8 breakout rooms. I think the text is going to be shared via a link, and there are different colors for the different group numbers. But these are the 2 questions I'd like you to focus on. So firstly, what's highlighted here in the section that you'll be discussing, and what can we learn? And if possible, please give an example of how it can be applied. I will be asking different groups to feedback at different points. So if you can choose one spokesperson for each group, so that when I share the corresponding slide, you can share it, that would be great. Okay, thank you, Neha. Fantastic. Okay, sorry, I wasn't sure. Okay, so Hare Krishna, everyone. I hope you guys had some nice discussions. I hope there was enough time for you to get something to feedback. I'm looking forward to hearing what everyone discovered. So just moving on to the next slide, which I'll need the first group to feedback for. So in terms of harmonious relationships, and I'm assuming you can see the screen, Sitadevi's example shows that one who acts according to Krishna's desire is peaceful and has harmonious relationships. So, sorry, I'll just move this out of the way. Any thoughts from the group that was discussing that? Can you think why?
So we were group 1, and like we described Sitadevi as being like she stayed the same throughout all of the ordeals that she faced throughout her life. So even when she was like in like a happy place with like Ram and all of her family, to when she got abducted and to when she was exiled, her like faith towards Ram and her duties, she never changed them. And so we thought what we discussed was one thing about like keeping a harmonious relationship is keeping true to each other despite like what situations that you face. And I think in the modern day, like people are like quite quick to make promises in when the situation is good, and sometimes they struggle to keep like steady in their like faith when things become a lot more difficult. So one thing that we thought might be a good thing to take away from her was the way that she was constant towards Ram.
Okay, fantastic. That's really beautiful. Was there anything you discussed around the relationships aspect, or was that the main kind of focus?
That was kind of the main thing, and also the fact that the problems that they faced like was a lot more sort of serious than some of the things that like we would have to go through. And so the sort of like arguments and things that I don't think that they would have had much of those because they focused on the bigger things.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much for, I think you kind of emphasized one of the main points, that they had a center focus, you said, and that prevented kind of conflict and harmonized everything. So this was along the lines of what I was thinking. I mean, first of all, somebody who acts according to Krishna's desire is, aligned with the source of everything. And really, because basically when we work for ourselves or sense enjoyment or material pleasures or whatever, there is misery. But when we're serving Krishna, there isn't misery actually, because we have that center focus on the source of everything, and the person who harmonizes all living beings is in the heart of everybody. So devotees generally, they don't get anxious and they don't regret things or kind of lament over things. That's a key quality of a devotee. And also because Krishna's full in himself and he's joyful, someone who's connected to him and engaged in his service also is joyful and also is full in themselves. So that kind of explains why they're peaceful. And there's a lovely verse in 529 of the Gita, if you want to look it up, called Bhoktaram Yagita Pasam Sarva Lokamaheshwaram Suridam Sarva Bhutana Yatva Mam Shantim Richti, which is basically, and the sages explain that Krishna says, knowing me, as in Krishna, as the ultimate purpose of all sacrifice and austerity, and the Lord of all the planets, the demigods, the well-wisher, and the kind of the person who cares for all living beings, someone who knows that Krishna is that, they attain peace from kind of miseries. So that deals with a kind of peaceful aspect. In terms of the harmonious relationships, and there's a really nice quote in the Srimad Bhagavatam 7:5-12, which says that everyone should be friendly for the service of the Lord. Everyone should praise another's service to the Lord and not be proud of his own service. And that's the way a devotee thinks. A Vaishnava thinks this way, that everyone should be able to give service to the Lord to the best of their ability, and everyone should appreciate the service of others. Such are the activities of the spiritual realm. And since everyone's a servant and on the same platform, everyone can serve according to their ability. So when we have Krishna as the center, our focus is on pleasing him, and we acknowledge that everyone may have different ways of doing things or different moods about them, but because they're also trying to have that center goal and that center focus, there is harmony in those relationships. And even here, even in the temples or even in Pandavasena, we can create the environment of the spiritual world just by having those harmonious relationships. And sometimes even if there is conflict, or there are difficulties, when we know that Krishna's in that person's heart, Krishna loves that person, even if I can't quite get on with them, at least I can respect them and understand that they're really dear to Krishna. So it's not that everyone's gonna always be in a complete harmony with each other until we get to that point where we really are focused on Krishna. But until then, at least we can theoretically understand the point that that person's doing what they think is best in the service of Krishna. Let me try and deal with them nicely. Let me understand that Krishna's in that heart as well. So I hope that helps. But thank you so much for your feedback on that. That was a really nice discussion that you guys had. Moving on to the next slide. So group 2, so I'll just read the slide quickly, but it's an excerpt from the article. But despite the uncomfortable, Sita follows her conscience. That's what's this slide's title. Despite the uncomfortable circumstances, Sita's peaceful. She's followed her pure interior directive, choosing wilderness over civilization, simplicity over opulence, austerity over luxury, and the satisfaction of following her conscience over the distress of being separated from Sri Ram. So the group that discussed that, what were your thoughts on that?
So we talked a lot about how at the beginning of the extract, Sitadevi clearly expresses by her own will that she'll go with to serve Lord Ram in his exile, and she actually says that every day she'll serve Ram and practice self-discipline, and she's so selfless in that way, and like it says, simplicity over opulence. Like even though in the extract Lord Ram says that like you'll have to sleep on the bare floor and there'll be mosquitoes and other things like worms and stuff, she'll still go, even though she'll go through that suffering. And she's in the extract it talks about how she sees it as her sacred duty, and this is her definition of being a devoted wife, and it shows like how she saw it as like her, I guess, her dharma, and how she followed her conscience because this is what she felt she had to do as a devoted wife. And that's the main thing that we discussed about.
It's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that, Sitadevi, that synopsis, and also focusing on those essential aspects that were in that excerpt that you guys are discussing, highlighting her strength of character and the choices she made. So like just talking a little bit more, I could throw out the question about what the conscience is, and I'm just going to explain a little bit about it. I think most of you have an idea, and from what you were saying, she decided to follow her inner directive. She decided to follow her dharma. So conscience is like an inner voice that guides us to do things. and tells us whether something we're doing kind of is right or wrong. And most people who are thoughtful will make decisions based on their conscience, treating it like in a compass. That's why I've got a compass on the slide. But sometimes that compass can kind of deviate from north because of other interfering magnetic fields in the form of our own conditionings and the modes of material nature. The modes, I hope you've discussed before, they're kind of different energy states that exist in this world and pervade the whole material world, but they can also have an influence on us because we're generally in a combination of these, and their goodness, passion, and ignorance. And if you want, I can explain a bit more about them. But the point is that because we have these, conditionings and impressions, our compass isn't always aligned with north. So sometimes somebody will say, oh, but my consciousness is saying that I have to go to war with this country because that's the right thing to do, or I have to persecute these people, or whatever. You see a lot of that happening. And if you speak to people who really have that in their mind, that is what they should do, they genuinely feel that that is what they should do. But the problem here is that their conscience is not aligned. And what's explained in the Gita in the 14th chapter is that, and the 16th chapter, is that actually the best thing is for our conscience to be guided by higher knowledge or scriptural knowledge. And if we're also practicing bhakti yoga or Krishna consciousness at the same time, our conscience becomes aligned with the true north. And we're also able to receive guidance from Krishna more clearly. And we become more connected and more receptive to his guidance as well. So yeah, that's just something just to explain that, sometimes someone think, oh, but my conscience is saying this, but we also have to kind of reflect, where is my conscience at? Is it really aligned? Is it kind of aligned with what Krishna might actually want me to do? And if in doubt, always check with devotees, with other saintly people, gurus, and obviously ultimately, the scriptures themselves if you're in doubt. But in Sita's situation, it's very clear from that discussion that even though Ram was trying to tell her, like, this is not going to be good for you, you're a princess, you're used to living in a certain way, and you should look after our parents, and you should, serve the family and perform austerities and wait for me, she was having none of it. She was very young actually at this point when she got married, and but she had it in her mind, and she knew that no, my dharma, the right thing for me to do is to be with you. And she actually says in that conversation that she'd prefer to end her life than leave him. Actually, if you read the kind of text of that conversation, it's quite a powerful conversation. So I hope that helps. Yeah, I mean, we can discuss more about that if we want to later, but I'm going to continue. So the next slide is Sita's resonance with the natural world. Forest life reveals that Sita has a special connection with the earth, the rivers, and animals. When the transcendental couple is first crossing the Ganges in midstream, Sita joins her hands in prayer. And she says, "O Mother Ganges, please protect Sri Ram on all sides. May he pass these 14 years without harm." So the group that discussed that, would you like to say something? To somebody there, I hope.
Haribol.
Haribol.
So we mentioned how Sita's connection to nature has really been highlighted here, and the fact that she could give up her materialistic attachments without hesitation. And we spoke about how real heartfelt relationships take precedence over everything else. So her relationship with Lord Ram had such a strong spiritual foundation that she was unwavering in her devotion towards him. So she prays for him before her own safety, which is a display of her selflessness. And we spoke about how real love is selfless.
It's wonderful.
And then we thought that we could implement this in our lives by recognizing that our true connection is nature. Our true connection with nature is eternal. We must remain unfazed by external fluctuations. So things can go wrong in our life, but we shouldn't remember what we're truly meant to be doing. We should establish our needs versus our wants, just like Sita gave up all of her material life, and the only thing she needed was nature. And also in the extract, it's discussed how all the animals seeked out to help her when she got abducted, and we established that relationships are reciprocal. So whatever love you give out, you're always going to get that back when you need it.
Oh, that's wonderful. That is so sweet and very. It really resonates, and I feel like you've really, thought about it deeply, which is so wonderful, and really sounds like you had a lovely discussion in the 7 minutes that you had the discussion. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think that's really true. And when I was reflecting on this, I was thinking that I mean, there's a lovely quote by Radhanath Maharaj, which I'll say first. He says that when our foundation is in harmony with the laws of nature, we'll live in harmony with our eternal nature. So there's a lot in that statement in itself, that actually we are supposed to be living in harmony with nature, and only when we actually are can we really live in harmony with our eternal nature, because ultimately everything is connected, and we are like caretakers or custodians of the planet. We're supposed to be looking after it. The earth is a living personality, it's Bhumi Devi. And, if you read about Krishna's descent to this world in Krishna book or in Bhagavatam, the earth actually, she goes personified to, Lord Vishnu, and actually says that, I can't cope with the burden of all these military warriors and everything that's happening. And that's one of the reasons that actually Krishna descends, to annihilate those or destroy those that are doing wrong, and to protect the devotees both. And right now, obviously, we can see with the current situation with coronavirus and a lot of kind of disturbances that are going on with the environment and the ecological situation of the planet, we can clearly see that things are not in balance, and the balance does need to be redressed. And as spiritual practitioners, we also have responsibility, and it's wonderful to see Sitadevi as divinity herself, so connected, so interlinked with nature, to the point where she can clearly resonate with it in a very, very real, tangible way. And she is portrayed also as the daughter of the earth in this pastime of Sitadevi, because she's found in the earth by Janak Maharaj when he's ploughing the earth after performing a sacrifice. So even her whole appearance is very mystical and connected to the earth and the environment. So there's a lot that we can really think about in connection to that. But I just think there's so much to learn from her example, and she's such a powerful person, and really relatable for us. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for that. It's really lovely. Moving on to the next group. So I'll just read the slide before I ask you for your thoughts. So Sita's determination. But even though an ordinary person in Sita's unkempt condition would be weak and miserable, she grows strong and more thoughtful. The flexibility with which she adjusted to changing situations in the forest has given way to an inflexible resistance to the terror of Ravan and his gods. So would the group who discussed this like to share some thoughts on this?
Yep, Haribol.
Haribol.
So we said that in this text, it shows how Sita had unflinching faith that Ram would come and save her. And this teaches us that we should also have this faith in God, that regardless of whatever situations we're going through in our life, that there's always going to be light at the end of the tunnel. And that this is all, whatever we're going through is part of some higher plan of Krishna's, and that we should see it as a teaching, and that ultimately whatever the situation that we're going through has been put there deliberately by Krishna to help us with our spiritual advancement. So that was one thing. Another thing was that she has such a steadfast mind, then that she was determined that Lord Ram would come and save her. So we should also have that kind of faith in Krishna as well. Part of the text, it also said how despite her situations, an ordinary person would become really weak and miserable, but instead she became so much more thoughtful and stronger. So that shows us how we should be tolerant in all situations, because ultimately they're there to teach us something. Another thing was that it's teaching us how we should be flexible in adjusting to the different situations that we're put through. Our life is always going to have ups and downs. It's not just going to be an easy ride. So we we should be able to have those foundations of spiritual practice that will ultimately sort of help us pass through all those events. And just the last thing, we can learn about her loyalty. Hanuman gave her that opportunity to leave Lanka, yet she refused. And she said that she had that vow that she would never touch another man other than Lord Ram. So therefore we can learn devotion in that sense, not just only to God, but also in our relationships. Yeah, that was it. Thank you.
Wow, that was really profound, and you really kind of analysed every section of the text so beautifully. I don't know if I have much to add, because I think you've covered a lot of really key points in terms of determination. Thank you so much, Yashvini, for that, for sharing that. Yeah, I think there was a lot in what you said that really rang true for me from when I'd read it. So thank you to your whole group for that. So yeah, I was thinking about this, and there's a really nice verse in the Bhagavad Gita 2.44, which says that in the minds of those who are too attached to sense enjoyment and material opulence, and who get bewildered by such things, the resolute determination for devotional service to the Supreme Lord doesn't take place. So we can clearly see in Sita's situation that even though she was a princess, and she was brought up in so much opulence, she had training, and she had inner resilience and detachment as well, that she could actually let go of everything in a second and make a decision to not just go to the forest, but then endure what happened, And I chose this picture. I wasn't sure whether to put it in or not, and I'm not advocating this character from Hunger Games at all, but the thought that went through my mind is that what Sita went through was horrific, actually, and sometimes we don't fully realize what she must have gone through as a very young, beautiful, newlywed princess. And I guess this image to me kind of portrays the fact that she was a warrior. Her battle may not have been with bows and arrows, but it certainly was with her strength of character and determination, her renunciation, her austerity, her faithfulness, her chastity, her the fact that she was unswerving once she made her mind up about something. So these are kind of the qualities of a warrior. And so that's why I kind of chose this image, but also Sita's determination. I mean, it's quite amazing, because how many of us could even do a fraction of it, when you actually think about it, to kind of just live on roots and berries and deal with insects and walking in forest path and letting go of all your jewels and your wealth and everything and just following your husband. And then on top of that, you're kind of kidnapped basically by somebody, and then like psychologically tortured. At one point Ravan said to them, that you just make her come to me, just tell her that she has to, you can use force if you need to, just persuade her to be my queen, and these guards were horrific that she had. They were Rakshasi ladies, and there was one that was very sympathetic to her. I think it's in that, I'm not sure if it's in that excerpt, but she actually stopped the others from being too harsh. I think it was Trijata, her name. But just to have gone through that ordeal, there were no mobiles, there were no texts or emails, or she didn't know if Ram was still alive or not. She didn't know where he was. She didn't know when he was coming until Hanuman showed up. She was just kind of waiting. But despite everything, she didn't give up hope, and she didn't give in to anything, and she stayed firm by her integrity and her vows and what she felt was her dharma. And I think it's important for us to reflect on this determination and strength of character, and realize that it is important for us to practice devotional service in a really real and tangible way, and know that if we want our cake and we want to eat it, it's not possible in spiritual life. And that's why this verse in 244 is very clear, that if you're overly attached to sense enjoyment and material opulence, and that doesn't just mean possessions and clothes and you know, TVs or computers. It also means, you know, kind of pride and fame and prestige and beauty. And if we're overly attached, those are all parts of that, you know, then it's very hard to have determination. I mean, there's a lot of other points on determination. One of them is that celibacy is a very natural way to cultivate determination. And that doesn't just mean, you know, kind of just doing things within marriage for children, which we understand is, you know, within the 4 regulative principles, but it also means not letting our minds and our consciousness be diverted from things that kind of agitate them, if that makes sense. So there are kind of like obvious things, and there are more subtle things, and that all falls within the realm of celibacy. So yeah, there's a quote here: by practicing celibacy, one cultivates determination. You know, so refraining from sex life enables one to be very determined and powerful. It's not necessary to do anything else. You know, so that's a very clear statement there. There's another statement in the Bhagavad Gita 241, which talks about intelligent determination of intelligence. And it says that those people who are on this path of the Bhagavad Gita are very resolute. Their aim is one. And the intelligence of those who are not resolute is many branched. So it's kind of like, oh, I'm following this philosophy, now I'm following that philosophy, and I'm not sure about this or that, and kind of wavering around everywhere. So also determination is encouraged and helped by, you know, putting our minds on a specific process of self-realization and really thinking about where we're going, and how we want to kind of progress. The determination is also quality of the mode of goodness, these 3 energy states that I was speaking about. And it's actually, and the mode of goodness is a stepping stone to transcendence or the spiritual platform. So for somebody who wants to, you know, really seriously cultivate spiritual life, it's important to cultivate determination, because without it, it's very difficult to really get to the mode of goodness. Yeah, I think that's what I'd say about it. But yeah, I do feel Sitadevi's example is extremely powerful and extremely relevant. So yeah, thank you for that group for their contributions. Moving on to this group, I'll just read the slide briefly. So always thinking, the source of Sita's strength, always thinking of Ram within her heart, Sita constantly seeks to reunite with him. Her commitment to him and her constant meditation on him protect her and give her the strength to resist Ravan's many advances and allurements. So can you see how I've just put these questions? But can we have the group that was discussing that, if possible?
Sure, Haribol, Nilamani, it's Komal here, Hare Krishna. It was me and Neha who discussed it, and we discussed what was highlighted in the verse. So what really came out was Sita's commitment to Ram. She had strong conviction and faith in Ram. And this strong conviction and faith really helped her sort of fight Ravan. And I think we were just imagining it must have been very, very hard, like you're being kidnapped and tortured, but still she had such strong faith within her that Ram would come and save her. And from it, what we learn is when going through difficulties, don't lose faith. It's very important that you have that conviction and faith in Ram and Krishna. And we were just talking about even the situation, I guess applying it now, going through now is like nothing compared to what Sita went through. And just keeping that faith, and she faced so many challenges. We're thinking how she was tortured and so much anguish, but she still continued, you know, keeping the faith and being strong to her values.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kamal, for sharing that. Did you want to say anything more?
No, that's it.
Okay. Sorry, thank you so much. Really powerful. And yeah, I think it's true when we actually really reflect on what she was going through, the ordeal that they went through, and her having to go through this extra like unpleasantness and horror of being taken by this big Rakshasa and then kind of, yeah, just put off, you know, off on this island of Lanka and then kind of guarded day and night and with no news of Ram and constantly being threatened and cajoled and psychologically kind of just tortured. It's really hard. But when we actually think of, I mean, as it says, her strength came from her commitment and her devotion, actually, and her constant meditation on him and her remembrance of him. So, yeah, I mean, Prahlad Maharaj is also the emblem of remembrance or smaranam, and we can see even in his life, you know, his father was Hiranyakashipu, and he tried to kill Prahlad in so many ways because Prahlad would not accept his father as God or as the most worshipable. He was adamant that Vishnu was, you know, God and the Lord of the universe, and he failed to kind of accept his father. His father was actually in the demoniac race of beings, and a very powerful personality who'd grasped lots of boons from Lord Brahma. And so he was virtually, technically in one sense, almost immortal, not quite immortal, but almost immortal. And then this half man, half lion form of Nishingadev appeared in the end and got around all the promises that he'd received from Lord Brahma and actually destroyed him. But throughout all the things that Prahlad Maharaj went through, he didn't stop remembering Lord Vishnu or Krishna. He was completely focused, and you can see the same thing in Sitadevi. And just kind of thinking also about this this thing that, you know, this idea that can we also learn and focus on Krishna or Lord Ram in the same way, because scriptures do explain that actually all living beings, whether they're in male or female bodies or animal bodies or whatever species or plant bodies, all living beings are actually considered in terms of philosophy female, and the only actual male technically in terms of philosophy is Krishna, because he is the supreme enjoyer, he's the Lord, he's the doer. He's the person who exercises control, and all of us are actually in some shape or form controlled and enjoyed, or, you know, we're considered that. It doesn't mean female in terms of the biological beings, it means female in terms of that kind of philosophical analysis, if that makes sense. So in terms of that, there's a nice conversation between Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his response to Vallabha Bhatt, where, you know, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu actually says that, you know, Krishna is actually the husband of all living beings. So, and if his order is to chant his name incessantly, then one who's chaste to the husband Krishna must chant his name all the time, you know, because you can't disobey the husband. So in that verse, it's implied that actually Krishna is the actual husband of everybody. So we can also learn from this and apply this ourselves, whether we're married or not, actually, and whatever happens in life, because actually Krishna is there for all of us, and he is the constant, and he'll always be there. So it's really important for us to develop that connection, and remember, you know, at times where we're kind of flagging or lacking strength or lacking resilience, if we've trained ourselves to work on that connection and that devotion and cultivated it to a certain point, then we'll be able to pull through. So I hope that gives some things for everyone to think about. I hope that's helpful. Moving on to the next group, Sita's forgiveness. Any suffering I felt was surely the result of my own past misdeeds, for such is the universal law. Indeed, there's an ancient maxim that is always the code of the virtuous. A righteous person doesn't consider the offenses of others. At all costs, that person always observes the vow of not returning evil for evil. For the virtuous consider good conduct their ornament. So could I hear from that group? Possible?
So what we realized was that despite the way the female gods had treated Mother Sita, and when Hanuman came to the grove to take her back to Lord Ram, even though Lord Hanuman was like trying to see, like saying, how can we, like, do you want me to do anything about the way they treated you for months? Mother Sita said that it was part of their duty it was just their duty, and she believed that she was in that position for her own misdeeds. Like, she didn't take it personally, she just brought it upon herself. That, you know, I'm in this position because of things that I had previously done. So she didn't want any harm to go towards them. And I think in a real life perspective, she didn't want to seek revenge towards them, basically. So evil for evil. In a real life perspective, I think we often go through situations, and sometimes we may not see, like, some of us may see what we've done wrong, and then others may see, okay, but what has this person done wrong? So I feel like you know, we shouldn't take things personally, and to always see the good in others. And if we do find ourselves in situations that we might find difficult, it's a good point that Pooja had made, was we should see it as Krishna putting us in a situation to burn off our past karma.
Thank you so much. That was absolutely fantastic. What a lovely analysis, and how relevant you've made it to all of us and to what we're going through in life. I think this is probably one of the hardest aspects, I think, of spiritual life, and to genuinely do. And it's not an easy one. But if we can at least theoretically even understand this as a start, and just study the quality and know that it's something really, really important. I mean, you can see that, you know, Sita's not going to stoop to a level of kind of, you know, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. She really doesn't think that way. And as it says, a virtuous person considers their conduct their ornament. So her behavior is her jewel, it's her ornament. And so she's never gonna kind of just like lash back for anything that's done. And in fact, she doesn't even blame them, you know. She, as you said, she just understands it was something she was supposed to go through, and that there's, you know, a universal law that's brought this about, something she may have done way back or whatever. And this is, you know, this is divinity. This is Sitadevi thinking this way, or an expansion of Radharani. And in the 9th canto of the Bhagavatam, it does explain that qualified Brahmins are worshipped by the people in general because they have this quality of forgiveness. The quality of forgiveness is more illuminating than the light of the sun. And those who have that ability to forgive are invested with the power to access the mercy and love of God. And that's quoted in a book called Evolve by Radhanath Swami. You know, he references the 9th canto of the Bhagavatam. And you can see that, you know, by saying it's more illuminating than the light of the sun, it kind of gives us an example, an understanding of how wonderful a quality is to be able to do this. Yeah, something that we can really aspire to. And if there are things that we're, you know, stuck with, then please, you know, discuss with devotees and other spiritually senior people. Don't let things fester away, because it will only affect our own spiritual journey, if that makes sense. So thank you so much. Moving on to, I think the next 2 slides is one group, but it was Sita's open-heartedness and her gratitude. So which group is that? If you'd like to, oh, I'll read the slide first. It says, I would be pleased if I could return to Yogi in the company of all the wives of the monkey chiefs. So this was in the section on open-heartedness.
Hare Krishna. So the 2 sort of characteristics that came out Sitadevi's from here were, as you said, open-heartedness, and the second one was gratitude. So on open-heartedness, Sitadevi basically, the fact here is that even though Sita and Ram went through so much on their way home, she was really she wanted to go home with all the wives of the monkey chiefs. And so what came out from there was inclusivity. So it wasn't just about, you know, Ram and Sita celebrating, but it was bringing in everyone together and making this a sort of celebration of everyone and including everyone going home together. So that was the point on open-heartedness. And the second one was gratitude here. And this point was that Sitadevi was so gratitude to Hanumanji that she actually didn't, it wasn't just like a, thank you, but she gave him a really prized possession of hers. So from this came out the 6 loving exchanges. So it's, the way in which we deeply thank someone. And so this was something that came out. And what we also said was that, it's not just about showing gratitude for all the good things that come in our lives, or but it's also showing gratitude for all the difficulties in our lives, and how that allows us to evolve our character and evolve our lives. So it's showing gratitude for even the difficult points in our lives. So that's what Sitadevi was doing here.
Wonderful. That was really, really lovely. Such a nice reflection on Sita's kind of thought pattern and what she did that showed these qualities, and how it might have made other things different, and the people who received the open-heartedness and gratitude kind of feel, etc. So thank you so much for sharing all of that. It's really lovely. So in terms of open-heartedness, I've got a lovely quote by Srila Prabhupada, which I'd like to read you. So love means open-heartedness. Love means 2 persons, there's exchange. Giving something, taking something, feeding something, to eat something, then speaking everything, no secrecy. And to know everything of the other person. When these things are transacted, then there's love. And that's based on text 4 of the Nectar of Instruction. Yes, it is. Yeah, well, I won't say the Sanskrit, but it's a really lovely kind of quote, because it kind of just shows that, yeah, if you're really close to someone, you're going to be open-hearted. And even in the text, even though there's just a simple example of her wanting to go with the wives of the monkeys, it kind of shows that she wanted to be with everyone, and she wanted to show that she was appreciative, and yeah, just to be close to them. And I think it's an important thing for us to consider in friendships as well, is this quality of open-heartedness and how we share it and how we can share. Obviously, it may be hard to do that with everybody, but it is a lovely quality to kind of imbibe. Yeah, so there's something on that. And gratitude. So I've already heard from the group, but I'll just read this. After the coronation, Sita wanted to give Hanuman something as a token of her appreciation for all that he did for her. She unclasps the necklace that Ram has given her and then looks at him. Understanding her intention, Ram asks her to give the necklace to Hanuman. She happily places it around his neck. So yeah, your group explained how nicely, that this was a prized possession she gave, and it was really a big gesture. It wasn't a small thing, that, she wanted to just show Hanuman some appreciation for everything he'd done. So I guess, my thought on this was, why is gratitude so helpful for spiritual life? Why is it emphasized so much? And Prabhupada says that gratitude is a condition of the heart that enables spiritual growth to take place. And Rukmini Devi, who some of you may have heard on the weekend on the retreat, also explains that pride doesn't grow easily in the soil of gratitude. And there's a very nice excerpt from a quote by Radhanath Maharaj, which also explains that when we cultivate gratitude and humility, it makes the disposition or the soil of the heart fertile and soft. So if you think of the analogy of bhakti or devotion being like a seed, and the chanting and hearing being like pouring water on the seed, it also needs optimal soil to grow. And that optimal soil is a heart that is a humble, tolerant and grateful heart. And that's why we have this verse, Trinadapi Shinichena Thoro Vasahisana, from the Shikshaska by Lord Chaitanya, because he explains that we should be more humble than a tree, more tolerant than a tree, more humble than a blade of grass, and be ready to offer all respects to others without expecting any ourselves. And he also explains that that verse should kind of be strung around our neck on the necklace of the holy names, and constantly placed over our hearts. Yeah, the verse should be worn on the string of the holy name and constantly placed over our heart. So that just kind of gives you a real idea that if our heart soil is not ready and is not right, or in an optimal situation, however much hearing and chanting we do, it's very hard for that seed of devotion to actually flourish. So it's actually an essential quality. And moving on to, this is the last slide, on unconditional love, and I'll just read it out. But in the pastimes of Sitadevi, we see the beauty of her character in contrast to the ugliness of palace politics that drives her and Ram into exile. We witness her love for Ram supersedes his duty to her. We see her graceful flexibility and accepting the austerities of the wilderness. We feel her fear of Ravan and admire her intelligence in opposing him. We find her steadfast and patient as Ravan's captive. We see her virtue winning even her vicious guards to her side. We see her ferocious anger towards Ravan soothed by her constant meditation on Ram. We discover that her austerities under the Ashoka tree make her not hard-hearted but compassionate. All these experiences are harmonized by her unadulterated, unconditional love for Sri Ramachandra. So thank you so much. I know that time's up now, but Neha and Vrindasundar, you can decide if you'd like to take a couple of questions or if we should round off now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nilamani. I don't think any questions came through the chat, but does anyone have a question?
If not, it's fine.
Yeah, 2000.
This is your chance, guys. If you have any questions, even maybe something that you've been wanting to ask over this weekend, perhaps. Anyone?
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Thank you so much for that wonderful session. My question was regarding faith. So right now my mom's reading Salted Bread, and she was telling me a few of the things that are going on. And the devotees there, they're like going through so much beating and everything, but yet they have so much faith. Like they're still chanting, they're still preaching to all the other prisoners. And I was just thinking, like, if I was in that position where someone said, like, stop chanting, otherwise I'll kill you, I really don't know what I would do. Like, I'd be so scared. So if you have anything to say on that, like how I can practically develop faith so that if in that situation, I can still continue chanting.
Wow, I mean, that book, Salted Bread, is a wonderful book, and it is definitely worth everyone having a look at or read a synopsis of, even if you can't read the book. But that is a very drastic situation, and I hope none of us are ever in that situation. But Shana, you're asking specifically about how to cultivate faith. And I really think that faith develops from us associating with those who have faith in the holy name. And it's not that necessarily all of us will get to that point where we can just, say, okay, the holy name comes before, Krishna comes before my life, and it doesn't matter what you're going to do to torture me. I'm not going to sign any documents saying that I'm not of this faith, or I'm, or anything against Krishna consciousness. I mean, that's a very, very high level of faith. But certainly we should try to cultivate faith in Krishna, and it's really important. And I think this aspect of hearing and chanting in the association of devotees is probably the most important, and having real devotee friends. I talked about these ways of being open-hearted or loving exchanges, and one of them is to reveal your mind and to also hear from somebody about how they're feeling. So even if we have one or two good friends in spiritual life, that's really, really important. And all these things will help our creeper of bhakti grow stronger till we can actually get to the point where, we actually have some genuine experiences of, the power of Krishna consciousness. I'm sure all of you have had in some shape or form, otherwise you wouldn't be here and taking time out on a Monday evening to hear this presentation, etc. So you already have so much faith, but it's just a question of nourishing it and helping it flourish. So like we discussed, that soil, that optimal situation of the state of our heart, and also the process of hearing and chanting. And the word Shraddha, the Sanskrit term, means where we place our heart. So also developing that heart connection with Krishna So journaling, writing to him, revealing our mind even to him, or you may want to write to the guru, but just developing that divine connection will also help faith to grow. So I hope that helps. I don't know if Nehal, would you like to add anything to that?
Thank you.
I'm sure, Shamli, you already have extremely strong faith, so I don't think you need to worry at all. Yeah.
Does anyone have any other questions? Because if not, then I do have an anonymous question to ask. No? Okay. Nilamani, do you mind if it's off topic?
You can try me. I mean, I'll say what I can.
Okay. So the person's saying, I've been questioning the difference between being humble and having a low self-esteem, as I feel it's easy to get the two mixed up at times. How would you stop that happening?
Mm-hmm. So the question is around how to distinguish between humility and low self-esteem and how to stop them getting muddled. So humility is an essential quality, as we discussed with gratitude, to keep that soil of the heart soft and ideal for the seed of bhakti to grow. But one symptom of humility as opposed to low self-esteem is that humility is always coupled with optimism. There's always hope, and there's always a smile on the person's face, and boldness, in fact, as well. One definition of humility, Srila Prabhupada said to Tamal Krishna Maharaj, who's a leader in the movement, one of his disciples, that when Tamal Krishna Maharaj asked him what's humility, Srila Prabhupada said, humility means to be bold for Krishna. So humility will not lead to apathy. It won't become degraded to the lower mode of ignorance. It won't become lazy or inert or kind of self-indulgent. It won't be self-focused either. Sometimes with low self-esteem, we become really preoccupied with ourselves, and we might think we're being humble, but actually we're constantly thinking, I'm not good enough, or it's always I'm something. So the focus is on the deficiency of the self. But it's self-focused, it's not Krishna-focused. Whereas humility is Krishna-focused. I'm just going to read you this prayer by Rupa Goswami, which is really, really wonderful, and I hope that helps answer the question. But it's just an example of humility and great hope, and hopefully it will help you to differentiate whether what you're going through is actually humility or actually low self-esteem. So it says, and this is from the Nectar Devotion, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, I have no love for Krishna, nor for the causes of developing love of Krishna, namely hearing and chanting. And the process of bhakti yoga, by which one is always thinking of Krishna and fixing his lotus feet in the heart, is also lacking in me. As far as philosophical knowledge or pious words are concerned, I don't see any opportunity for me to execute such activities. But above all, I'm not even born of a nice family. Therefore, I must simply pray to you, Gopi Jana Vallabha, Krishna, maintainer and beloved of the gopis. I simply wish and hope that some way or other I may be able to approach your lotus feet. And this hope is giving me pain because I think myself quite incompetent to approach that transcendental goal of life. So he's talking about, it's a very deep prayer, but he's basically saying, I haven't really got anything good about me, particularly. But you're so wonderful, Krishna. You can do anything. And I've got this hope that, I'm going to get there. And even that hope is actually kind of giving me pain in my heart. But, there's an optimism. I don't know if you can hear it. There's an optimism. I'm not sure if the person can respond because it's an anonymous question, but hopefully you guys can get it. But, there's no inertia. There's no kind of stagnancy. There's no kind of, oh, I'm awful, so I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to just sit and think about how terrible I am, or just how, I'm not this, I'm not that, and I just can't get this. I'm so, there's none of that. It's not self-indulgent. It's, yeah, okay, I don't have these things, but Krishna, you're wonderful. You can do anything. So humility is always coupled with optimism. I'd say that is one very simple way, probably the easiest way to tell which one is. I hope that helps. Thank you.
She said that it does help.
Okay, that's a relief. I mean, the other thing I'd say about humility is that, you know, sometimes people think, oh, how can I cultivate humility? How can I be humble? This, all this stuff, you know, but actually, the easiest way of doing it is actually to focus on Krishna and focus on how wonderful he is. And when I mean him, I mean the whole spiritual perspective and realm. Because when we realize how wonderful Krishna is, how wonderful the process is, and how wonderful Sitadevi is, and Rama, and all these, you know, the divine is, how wonderful these divine personalities are, we very naturally realize that we're really not all that, because we're actually quite small. You know, and I don't mean small as in, oh, you're small. I don't, you know, I just mean like ontologically, the spirit soul is actually like a fragmental part of spirit. And then there's Krishna or, you know, Ram, who are like that kind of huge, vast ocean of spiritual wonder. And so actually, as we don't have to kind of like falsely try to be humble, we just have to focus on the positive aspect of getting to know Krishna and glorifying him. And when we do that, we'll naturally just feel that, oh yeah, I'm okay, but you know, Krishna's really okay. He's really great. And we just realize what humility is. It's a very natural thing. Yeah, hope that helps.
One more question. So Carolyn had a question.
Okay, does she want to ask?
Yeah, I think she can come.
You can unmute. You need to unmute, Carolyn.
Oh, sorry. I like started talking. I was like, okay. Basically, okay, so you mentioned one of Sita's qualities as forgiveness. It was in the text. And I think her approach was to understand that what happened to her wasn't necessarily, she didn't assign the blame to Ravan, but just saw it as something as a result of her past deeds. But then I was thinking, like, she didn't really have to see Ravan again. So it was kind of, I guess, you know, out of sight, out of mind, I guess, in a way. And sometimes, like, most of us, if we have to forgive someone, we still have to, like, interact with them. They may be, like, in the community or, like, family members or, like, whatever. And I feel like there's only so many times you can be like, oh, well, you know, I'm not going to blame them for this, or I'm just going to try and cultivate forgiveness if it's like, if it feels like it happens a lot. So how would you say you could cultivate that kind of forgiveness in that context?
Yeah, no, that's a very relevant question. And I think it's really important for us to understand that you can be forgiving, but that doesn't mean that you're kind of like a walkover, or that you kind of tolerate things that you know, are outside of the boundary. So it doesn't mean you tolerate abuse, and I mean both psychological or physical, or torture, or kind of, you know, mistreatment or negligence or neglect or whatever. Forgiveness doesn't mean that we don't call it out. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't mean that we don't call a spade a spade. You know, Prabhupada said humility is to be bold for Krishna. So, you know, part of humility is to say what's what when we need to. So if there is something going on that is really not acceptable and is actually detrimental and is kind of really damaging you, yeah, you can have that spiritual perspective. You can still have that perspective that, okay, maybe this is happening because of something that started way back in my past. Krishna must have an arrangement. Maybe I've got something to learn. Maybe there's something karmic involved, or maybe it's just there for my purification, and maybe actually it's not that hard and I just need to rise above it. That's okay. But if it's actually not right, and it's not good for that person, it's not good for you, then you do need to call it out. You know, and that may involve speaking to an appropriate person. It may involve speaking to someone else who can speak to that person. It doesn't mean that you just don't do anything about it. That's my point. I mean, Sita didn't want to get back at any of these Rakshasis because she really genuinely saw it as coming from somewhere else, but we cannot be inauthentic about forgiveness. Forgiveness and humility are actually tied to authenticity. And so is gratitude. You know, they all are, all those qualities are, and it's important for us to be real about where we're at. I mean, Mahatma Prabhu has a lot of workshops on forgiveness, and they're very good. I mean, I remember when I heard that he did in Mayapur, and part of the exercise was about putting yourself in the perpetrator's shoes and explaining, like the other person would role play you and you would role play the perpetrator, or the person who's done you wrong, and think about why they're behaving that way and what's brought them to that point and blah blah. But I think, Caroline, your point specifically is about you're seeing this person again and again. You know, if it's something really mild and you think it's actually okay and it's not kind of a red flag or something that's a no-no, complete no-no, then you can draw a boundary. You can have an adult conversation. You can choose to avoid that person if you want to, even if you do forgive them. It's not that you have to keep re-exposing yourself to the same person again and again. And if you can have that conversation, great. But if not, you can always convey it in some other way. I mean, certainly if something is damaging to you and to your psychology, it's not healthy to keep putting yourself back in that scenario, if that makes sense. Yeah, I don't know if that helps, or if there's anything else you'd like to add, because I'm not sure if I completely got it, but I think you kind of get my drift. Yeah. Anything else to add, Caroline, on that?
No, yeah, I think that's a really good answer. Just setting boundaries and yeah, just understanding. I think it's sometimes easy. I think as a devotee, because we're like really soft-hearted and very like, you know, well, in an ideal situation, we're soft-hearted and very forgiving, that you can kind of get yourself into a situation where you could be sort of exploited. So yeah, I think setting boundaries can help, and you know, maybe potentially avoiding people that, you know, trigger that could help. Yeah, so yeah, really nice. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope that helps, and I hope no one is in that situation. I mean, I do genuinely, I'd say one thing, if you are in that situation where there's repeated negativity being thrown, and obviously there's a lot of talk about this right now in the news, in the world, with everything going on with George Floyd stuff, etc. If you are in a situation where, you know, there is some sort of prejudice or some sort of kind of like real attack going on, then please speak to somebody at least. Don't hold it all on your own and think that it's okay. You know, ultimately, though, you know, we do need to come to a point of understanding and forgiving, but that doesn't mean that we don't call things out and that we're just walkovers, or that we don't try to actually have those adult conversations and just kind of brush it off. Yeah, I hope that helps. Thanks, Carolyn.